Hello and welcome to the Gonzales Mitchell Show. I'm Clay Mitchell,
And I'm Patrick Gonzales.
and today we have a very special guest, our first guest, in fact. We're going to talk about the convention, all things politics, the presidential race, and our guest is none other than Len Foxwell. Len is the principal of Avon Strategies. He's also a lecturer at Johns Hopkins Center for Leadership Education and the director of Johns Hopkins University HopStart Program. So, Len, what's
Good
going
morning.
on? What's
Good
going
morning,
on?
Len.
Good morning, Patrick, Clay. It's great to see both of you again. And Clay, you mentioned my work with Johns Hopkins University and with the HopStart initiative. And I know we'll talk about that in some other time.
Right.
But I just want to take a moment as a point of personal privilege to thank you for your help on both of those fronts. You've been a guest lecturer in my classes for the past several years now, and you've also been a mentor and judge in our HopStart initiative, and you have been a really instrumental part in the growth and success of that student innovation initiative. So thank you for
It's
lending your time and your expertise.
it's my pleasure. What a fabulous group of students. They're the smartest people on the planet, as far as I'm concerned. Great ideas come out of HopStart.
Thank you.
So Len, what we just went through this week with the Democratic Convention. Uh, we have a presidential race that's going to start heating up effective today. How did you think about how the Democratic Convention went this week? What were your thoughts?
I thought it was a successful production on every level. First, I think there were a number of things that could have gone wrong that obviously didn't. First and foremost, the sheer logistics involved of just a month ago, basically changing out the nominee of the Democratic Party from President Biden to Vice President Harris. That forced an overhaul of the optics, the timing, the substance, the participants in the national convention, and they managed to do it all and make that transition in as quick and as seamless a manner as possible. And that's no easy feat. As someone who's been involved in politics at both the state and national level, you know how hard it is to turn around a barge of that magnitude, and they did it. I would also say that we were all concerned or perhaps anticipating, depending on where you are on the political spectrum, that the National Convention in Chicago would be overshadowed by protests over the U.S. position in the Gaza conflict. While there were protesters and while they had their say, there was no evidence that things got out of hand or that it overshadowed the occurrences inside the United Center. And so I think that has to be considered a win. And then finally, I think what we saw coming out of Chicago was that the Democrats have a phenomenally deep bench. And so the vice president gave a terrific speech, as did the vice presidential nominee, Tim Walz. But we've heard from Maryland's own Wes Moore. We heard from Josh Shapiro, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who I thought was terrific last night, Roy Cooper of North Carolina. I mean, Mark Kelly. This party, barring an unforeseen sea change, is well positioned for success over a longer term horizon beyond just this next election. Having said that, we have to win this election. And on that front, I would say that the optics of the race have changed considerably, but the fundamentals have not. And I'm happy to talk about that.
I have to say, I thought, and Patrick and I discussed this earlier in the week, it was a proud Maryland moment in prime time when Governor Moore gave his speech. And I flipped through live streams and I flipped through the news channels. And I happened to come across Fox News after Governor Moore's speech, and they had a panel of 5 people. All of them said exactly what you said. The Democrats appear to have a really deep bench of qualified candidates coming up. When asked who they thought the next leading candidate would be, 4 of the 5 of them said Wes Moore from Maryland. I think that
Wes Moore.
that bodes well for our governor.
I love it.
Westmore definitely has the it quality that we don't see terribly frequently in politics.
No doubt. And to that point, I would just like to add that Angela Alsobrooks, the Prince George's County executive, is in a very close and competitive race with former Governor Hogan, and I think her primetime turn on, I believe it's all running together now, but I think it was
Tuesday
Tuesday
night. Day. Yeah,
Tuesday night. I think she did a good job. I think she accomplished what she had to achieve, and I suspect she'll get a little bit of a bump. I think she's going to win that race anyway, just because the nature of Senate races are fundamentally different from gubernatorial races. They are determined less by the personal characteristics of the candidates, and it becomes more of a binary partisan choice because are you going to caucus with the Republicans or the Democrats, particularly when control of the United States Senate hangs in the balance. So I think that it works to the prohibitive favor of this county executive. But that said, every bit helps, and I'm sure she got a bump out of it.
How do you see the tone? Go ahead, Patrick.
There's a reason, Len, that a Republican has not won a federal office, a statewide Senate race since 1980 with Mac Mathias, and I think you hit on some of the main reason why. And honestly, at this point, and I'm going to put in a little plug for Gonzales Research and Media Services. We are starting a poll in the next day or so, statewide on the presidential race and the Senate race. And I am just waiting with bated breath to see what's going on, Len, in that Senate race, because I'm just fascinated by it.
Well, I will also put in a plug for Gonzales Research, because I've been working now with you, Patrick, for 30 years in this business. We go back a long. And I have come to you with many polls for many candidates. Your numbers have always, and I mean always, been impeccable. They've been predictive, and your analytics are just the best in the business. So,
thank you. Thank you.
I treasure. You're a dear friend, but you're also one of the finest survey researchers in this business.
Well, I appreciate
it. In Maryland, he is. You are, Patrick. You're a legend in this business.
Well,
no doubt.
Thank you. And Len and I have been working together for 30 years. We were both 5 when we started. We were precocious.
I feel there are days I feel younger than others. This is one of these weeks in which I'm an old soul. But I want to go back to something you asked about the convention, where there was so much talk about the vibe, and that's an overused term, but the mood inside the United Center and the more general mood of the Democratic Party at this moment. And I know that vibe doesn't equate to votes and that there's still a long way to go, but that positive aura that is coming out of the Democratic Party right now, and it starts with the nominee herself. I think that is spun gold for the Democrats right now. And Patrick, I think you would agree that over the course of history, optimism beats pessimism every time.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
The first election I can remember as a 10-year-old kid was Ronald Reagan versus Jimmy Carter in 1980. And it was morning in America versus malaise. Carter had a very pessimistic view of the American prospect, and Ronald Reagan saw America as a shining city whose best days were still ahead. And we saw how the voters responded. And I think I'm seeing some of that right now in the contest between Harris and Trump, where Kamala is, really leaning into this aura of positivity and possibility around her candidacy. And Donald Trump continues to project this very dark dystopian image of America as a hellhole in decline, in perpetual decline. And at some point, I think people who are outside of his natural political base just say enough with the
Let me ask you this,
bonfires.
Len. When you talk about the tone of the campaign, it starts today. Obviously, I think both parties had very well produced conventions.
Mhm.
The Democratic Party just came off of a really good week. It was a 4-day advertisement for their candidate and their party today. The criticism of Vice President Harris is she hasn't done a sit down interview. She didn't talk about Russia or China, and really didn't talk about her job on the border. She has to fight back coming up, don't you think? And how do you think that may change the dynamic of the tone of the Democratic message?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. To the extent that there is a criticism of the campaign up to this point, is that she has not sat down for press interviews. She hasn't laid out in any real level of depth her foreign policy, her economic policy, positions on everything from energy independence to entitlements reform. And so that has to be flushed out. And I think not only do we as Americans deserve to hear how our someone who could possibly be our next president is going to address these issues that affect our livelihoods and quality of life, but I think it benefits her because as you mentioned at the outset, I teach at Johns Hopkins. I teach communications, and we talk about the empty glass theory, where every news story and every issue represents an empty glass, and either you're going to fill that glass with your content as you see fit, or someone else is going to do it for you. So you have to define yourself and your cause before the other guy does it for you. And so I think to the extent that she leaves some of her policy priorities vague and undefined, it creates that lane of opening for Donald Trump to come in and do it for her. And that's clearly what he's trying to do. We heard it last night on Fox News.
Right.
He's set up a website that I think mischaracterizes a lot of her positions or takes some out of context, but she's going to have to put some meat on that policy bone sooner rather than later.
We had the
Yeah,
September. Go ahead, Patrick.
I think I think up to this point, from my eye, Len, Clay, the Democratic Convention was a total success. They accomplished what they wanted. Now we move forward, and I'd say the Republicans accomplished what they wanted. So, kind of come out of it, come into what, Len? You're the expert on this. The seventh inning? Are we in the seventh inning, or are we in the fifth inning? Moving toward the final.
Wow, you're asking me to fuse my two passions in life, which is politics.
I know.
I would say that we are now somewhere in the middle innings.
Yeah,
and we're now in the process of setting up the dynamics that will guide the stretch run.
and I would say the score is tied right now.
I would agree.
And the last 3 to 4 to 5 maybe innings will decide the game. I am just so excited about today forward through November 5th. I guess the first big kind of benchmark is September 10th, right? The first debate.
Debates.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's and it's just going to be very, very interesting, but very important for this country. So,
I was reading a news article yesterday. I can't remember what publication I saw this on, but the gist was that most Americans believe that inflation is much higher than it currently is. As we know, the inflation rate now is somewhere under 3%, but when asked in a survey, most Americans actually believe it was somewhere between 15 and 20%. And I think that underscores, and that's totally understandable, right? Because Americans are consumers. They are not macroeconomists. And, we don't really think about the overarching data that underpins the American economy. We want to know what the price of milk, bread, and eggs are. But I think that does underscore the importance for this vice president to tell the story and be sensitive and responsive to those concerns that people have about rising prices and stagnant wages, and talk substantively about what she's going to do to get this economy moving again.
Len, I'm sorry.
No, and I don't think she's done it yet. I don't think it's a conversation that she'll be able to avoid.
That is a perfect example of where in politics perception is reality. And you're right. You got to kind of frame it in a way so all of a sudden you recognize, if the editorial you keep harping on, well, it's actually, look at the books, it's 2%, but the perception is what you described. That's a losing argument. And
Right.
So no, I dig what you're saying.
So
Well,
again, I'll just say that
Yeah.
the optics are completely different. The fundamentals are still the same. I mean, the issues in front of us are the crisis on the southern border, the impact of our current economic conditions on Americans' ability to make ends meet, and then of course we have the future of reproductive rights and the preservation of a woman's right to choose. And I think those were the issues 8 months ago that were going to decide the outcome of this election. And I still think that's the case today.
It's a lot to debate, a lot for the American public to digest and work out here in the next, 74 days till the election. My friend, we're glad that you joined us today. We do want to have you on again to talk about the HopStart program, because I think that's just a wonderful, wonderful uh, uh, program that has people have to understand what that program is to really appreciate it. But we want to have you on to discuss that.
Thank you so much. I would look forward to it. And again, Clay, thanks for everything you've done to grow the program into what it is right now. And Patrick, it's just been such a pleasure seeing and reconnecting with you.
It was great seeing you. It's been too long.
Likewise.
So thank you, Len. It's now time to say goodbye, Patrick.
Goodbye, Patrick.
Goodbye, Patrick. And we'll see you all next time.
Thank you, Len.
Thanks, guys.